Good day, everyone. Our topic is all about the more resistance to Spanish aggression. I am having Grace Amanayan and I will be discussing about the Spanish Moro Wars. Before we talk about the Spanish Moro Wars, we need to understand one thing. Spain was able to conquer Luzon and Visayas easily, but Mindanao and Sulu were different. These places already had strong leaders, strong armies, and a strong religion. So the Spanish Moro Wars were the long and continuous fights between the Spaniards and the Moro people, which includes the Muslims in Maguindanao, Sulu, and Danao, which are the Maranaos. These wars were not short because they lasted for more than 300 years from the 1500s until the end of the Spanish rule in 1898. So imagine many generations grew up in a time of war. Why did the Spaniards call it Guerras Piraticas? The Spaniards did not call these wars the Spanish Moro Wars. They called them Guerras Piraticas, which means wars against pirates. But why? Were the Moro pirates? No. The Moros were defending their land and their freedom. These Spaniards used the word pirates to make the Moros look like criminals. This way, Spain could justify their attacks and make it look like they were doing good or they were doing something good or just. So the term Guerras Praticas was a strategy, a way to make Spain look right and the Moros look wrong. In reality, these wars were Spain's attempt to conquer the powerful Moro sultanates. So, what was the real purpose of the wars? The real purpose was not about stopping piracy. The real purpose was to take control of the Sultanate of Maguindanao and Sultanate of Sulu. These sultanates were independent. They had leaders, laws, armies, and wealth, and a strong Islamic identity. Spain wanted to control their land, control their trade, and spread Christianity. And to add these places to their Spanish Empire. But the Moro people did not allow it. They fought back to defend their religion, their government, and their territory and their freedom. The Maranos was never conquered easily because they had their own unique and very organized political structure. This system is called the Pate Pangampong Coronao. This system was composed of four great principalities, also known as Pengampong. The four principalities are the Bayabao, Masiyo, Unayan, and the Baloy. These four areas cooperated with each other, but each also had its own leaders and their own territories. How the Maranao's government worked. Each pangampong was divided into suko. The suko is like the districts. Thus, each suko was divided into agama, like small communities. Each agama was made up of around 2 to 5 families. Each family lived in a kaig, meaning one sleeping place or a household. Why is this important? This detailed is political organization shows us that the Maranaos were not disorganized, they were not easy to control, and they had strong unity and leadership. So this system helped them defend Lanao for hundreds of years. It explains why both Corquera and 1639 and Whaler in 1891 failed.
What were the various phases and highlights of this war? The Spanish Moro Wars were divided by historian Cesar Adi Mahul into six phases. It started during the arrival of Miguel Lopez de Legazpi in Visayan waters in 1565 until the last of Spanish forces left the archipelago in 1898. Although at times truce and peace treaties were forged by the Spaniards and the Moros, the violence in general characterized Spanish-Moro relation. The Spanish-Moro Wars were a very long struggle between the Spanish, who wanted to rule the whole Philippines, and the Moro people who refused to be controlled. Even though there were very moments of peace, the relationship were mostly full of conflict and fighting. The first phase in 1565 to 1578. Spain claimed the Philippines because Magellan discovered it in 1521. But a claim means nothing unless you can show real power. Back then, the rule was might makes right. Whoever is strong enough to control something gets on it. Spain said that the Philippines belonged to them because Magellan reached the island in 1521. But just discovering a place didn't automatically make it theirs. Back then, the rule was basically that whoever was the stronger had the right to own the land. So for Spain, to truly claim the Philippines, they had to show real power, like building forts, sending soldiers, and defending rivals who might also want to fight them. In short, in saying this is ours wasn't enough. They had to prove it by force. So before Spain came, the Sultanate of Brunei in Borneo already had strong influence in the Philippines. Brunei traded, collected tribute, and spread Islam in many communities. Even Raja Sulaiman in Manila was related to the Sultan of Brunei. Spain's first battle in the Philippines, known as the Spanish-Moro Wars, were directed against Brunei because the Sultanate was seen as their main rival of the control of the islands. Even before the Spain arrived, Brunei already had strong influence in the Philippines through trade and politics and religion. Many local leaders were connected to Brunei, including Raja Sulaiman, the ruler of Manila at the time of Legazpi's arrival, who was related to the Sultan of Brunei. People from Brunei often traveled freely to the Philippines to trade goods, collect tribute, and spread Islam, showing how deeply involved they were in the region. This show the Spain had to fight Brunei first to remove the powerful competitor and make their claim over the Philippines real. 1565, Spaniards captured a Bruneian trading ship near Bohol. 1569, they fought 20 ships from Brunei and Sulu, captured four and took the loot. In 1578, Spain invaded Brunei, taking advantage of internal disputes there. After the Spanish invasion of Brunei in 1578, Brunei mostly stayed out of the Philippines affair. Spain succeeded in removing its biggest rival, clearing the claim control over the island. All of this was done to scare Brunei away and prove Spain's strength. Spain claims to rule Philippines didn't make sense as long as Brunei and its allies were active in the region. That's why, from the time of Legazpi arrived in 1565, the Spaniards tried to show their strength by attacking Bruneian traders in 1569. They fought against 20 ships from Brunei and Sulu, capturing some vessels and sharing the loot. Later, in 1578, Spain even joined a royal family dispute in Brunei, which led to a full invasion. All of these actions were meant to scare Brunei away and to stop it from the challenging Spain's control over the Philippines. So for the first phase, it's all about the Spaniards wanted to stop Brunei from influencing the Philippines. And at that time, Brunei and Sulu were connected because their sultans were brothers-in-law. Two brothers in Brunei, Pangeran Buong Manis and Sirif Ur Rijal, fought over the throne. Pangeran asked the Spaniards for help. In return, he promised to accept Spanish to rule if they make him sultan. The Spaniards invaded Brunei, forced Saf ul Rijal to flee, and put Pangeran was on the throne. But Pangeran was soon assassinated by his own relatives, so Saif ul Rijal came back as sultan. The second phase in 1578 to 1597. With Brunei no longer interfering, Spain turned its attention to the Moros territories, Sulu and Mindanao. Their goal is to build forts, collect tribute, and control the area. After Brunei stopped interfering in the Philippines, Spain moved quickly to strengthen its control. The Spaniards began building forts and setting up colonies right inside Moro territories in Mindanao and Sulu. Their goal was not only to show power but also to show force the Moro communities to pay tribute, which meant recognizing Spanish authority. This marks the start of Spain's direct attempt to dominate the Moro population and expand its rule beyond Luzon to Visayas. The Spanish captain Esteban Rodriguez de Figueroa led an attack on Sulu. The Sulu Moros fought back because their chief Raha Ilo was captured. Because of this, the Sultan of Sulu was forced to pay tribute or taxes to Spain. After collecting the tribute, the Spaniards left and moved on to the Mindanao. The Spaniards' first target after Brunei was Sulu, which they had to attack in June 1578 under the captain of Esteban Rodriguez de Figueroa. The Sulu Moros fought back, but their leader Raja Ilo was captured before reaching his fort. Because of this, the Sultan of Sulu was forced to pay tribute for himself and his followers. After securing this submission, the Spaniards was moved onto the mainland Mindanao, especially in the Maguindanao, where they live and they tried to establish colonies and include the area under the Spanish rule in the Philippines. Spain was still obsessed with spices, especially those in the Moluccas, or the Spice Islands. They wanted to use Mindanao and Sulu as bases to eventually conquer the Spice Islands. Figueroa landed in Cotabato, Mindanao, to explore and colonize. He was ambushed and killed by a warrior using a campilan, a traditional Moro sword. Despite Figueroa's death, Spain built a fort in Tampacan between Maguindanao and Buyuan Sultanates. The Spaniards wanted to secure Mindanao and Sulu because they saw they are areas as strategic bases for reaching the Moluccas, a famous spice land that were highly valued in Europe. Obsessed with controlling the spice trade, Spain tried to use the Mindanao and Sulu as stepping stones for conquest. In 1596, Esteban landed in Cotabato but was killed in battle. Despite his death, the Spaniards built a fort in Tampacan between the Maguindanao and Buyuan Sultanates. Through local rulers, helped by the warriors from Ternate, resisted. Shortages, and poor communication forced Spain to abandon Tampacan and move to Zamboanga, where they built another fort in La Caldera. However, constant attack from the Moros eventually drove them out in 1597. The Moros, with help from Ternate warriors from Indonesia, tried to destroy the fort but failed. However, Spain struggled with supplies and communication, so they abandoned Tampacan. They built another fort in Zamboanga that called La Caldera. In 1597, constant Moro attacks forces Spain to abandon Zamboanga too. The Spaniards attacked Sulu and Mindanao because they wanted to use them as stepping stones to reach the Spice Island. They built forts to show power, but the Moro resistance was fierce. Spain kept retreating because of constant attack and lack of supplies and poor communication. The third phase in 1599 to 1600, the Spaniards had to abandon their forts in Tampacan and Zamboanga. This showed the Moors that Spain was not unbeatable. The Moors began raiding Spanish territories in Luzon, Visayas. They even collected tribute or taxes from local communities competing directly with Spain. Historian Peter Going called this phase counterattacks because it was marked by Moro retaliation. When Spaniards abandoned their forts in Tampacan and Zamboanga, the Moro realized that Spain was not unbeatable. This encouraged them to fight back in the years that followed. The Moros launched raid attacks against Moros-controlled areas in Luzon and Visayas. They even went as far as collecting tribute from the local communities, directly competing with Spain authority. Because of this, historian Peter Going called the third phase of the Spanish-Moro Wars counterattacks, since it was marked by Moro retaliation or revenge and resistance against Spanish power. The Moro Sultanate sought help from other powers, like Ternatans from Indonesia, Makassar from Sulawesi, and Borneans and the Dutch, who were also rivals of Spain at that time. The Ternatans were the people of Ternate, a Muslim kingdom in the Molucca Spice Island. The third phase was the Moro fight back. After seeing Spain retreat, the Moro launched raids and counterattacks against Spanish territories. They showed strength by collecting tribute themselves and even sought allies from nearby Muslim states and European rivals. This phase proved that Spain's control was shaken and could be challenged. The fourth to the sixth phase. Samoro's raid succeeded, angering the Spaniards. Spain retaliated with stronger attacks on more territories. Moro reinforced defenses and launched counterattacks. Violent battles across many areas, retaliatory raids back and forth, widespread chaos and destruction, confusion about who was attacking whom, marked by constant fighting, confusion, and destruction, continued until 1898 when Spain left and America. In four to six phases of the Spanish-Moro Wars, the fighting became even more violent and chaotic. Successful Moro raids against Spanish territories made Spain furious, so they launched stronger attacks on Moro islands. The Moros in turn built up their defenses and carried out more retaliatory raids. This back and forth created confusion and destruction. For example, when Maguindanao Moro raided the Visayas, Spain responded by attacking Sulu. Adding to the disorder, pirates called the Camocones from Brunei also carried out their own raids, making it hard for the Spaniards to tell which attack came from Mindanao, Sulu, or the pirates, and whether they were official or just piracy. This messy situation defended Spanish Moro retaliation until the Americans took over in 1898.
Which moral leaders' personalities figured prominently during these wars? Before I start, let me introduce myself. I am Jory Borlas, and I will be the next reporter. The Spain-Moro Wars were long conflict between Spain and Muslim sultanates in Mindanao and Sulu. The Moors fought to defend their independence from Spanish rule. Spain used Christianized Visayas and Luzon natives as soldiers, leading the Moro leaders to raid these areas. The raids were strategic actions and not random violence. Datu Busan raided Leyte and formed a blood compact with the Leyte Datus to unite them against Spain. Datu Busan is a moral leaders from Maguindanao, attacked Leyte and spoke to the local Datus. He encouraged them to unite and rise against the Spaniards, saying that Spain was weak and could be defeated if Filipinos stood together, because many Visayans Datos were unhappy under the Spanish rule. They agreed with him and performed a blood compact. A blood compact is a pre-colonial ritual that symbolized brotherhood and unity. This act showed that, despite religious differences, native leaders shared a common identity before Spanish rule. Mm. Dr. Jose Rizal noted that Moro raids were meant to weaken the Spain by reducing its manpower. And Dr. Jose Rizal supported this view, stating that Moro raids were necessary act of resistance and not cruelty. Dato Sirungan, kind to captives, followed Islamic law and led strong resistance against attack. Dato Sirungan was the Raja of Bayan, who kindly treated his prisoners, including the Jesuit priest and Melchor Hurtado. Hurtado, who lived among the Maguindanaoans for about a year in 1603, describes the Dato as someone who knew the Islamic law, avoided wine and pork, and forced not the Visayan Christians living in Israel to embrace the Islam. And according to Hurtado, Dato Buisan, a strategic who used diplomacy, blood compact, to rally natives against Spain. Buisan expressed regret over raiding Christianized communities, but explained that Spain was using people from Luzon and Visayas as soldiers against the Moro. To defend their independence, Moro leaders believed that they had no choice. They had no choice but to weaken Spanish power by reducing its manpower. That's all.
Hi, I'm Regine Caballo, and I will continuing the part of Moro leader. Another gallant Moro leader during the Spanish-Moro Wars was Sulu Sultan Raha Bungso. This sultan was described as having noble character and knowledgeable in affairs of state. In local Sulu sources, he was known as Kitabs, na nakipaglaban siya ng husto at matagal laban sa mga white men on land and sea. In Spanish sources naman, siya ang may panagutan sa pag-atake ng mga Spanish shipyard in Camarines, burning the dockyard and sinking unfinished ships. Also, also in Maranao, they produced a brave leader, Dato Amay Pakpak, who offered gallant resistance to Governor General Mariano Weyler. Nigo niya ang pag-atake ni Weyler to colonize the Lake Lanao and resisted Spanish efforts to fortify Marawi. Despite initial success in pushing Spanish forces back, nabigo naman ang kanyang kuta in 1895, leading to death of Dato Amay Pakpak, his son, 23 datos, and 150 other Maranaos defending their fort or kuta. And who, of course, has not heard of the name Sultan Kudarat? The fact that a town and an entire province was named after him was not without basis. Perhaps the greatest of the Maguindanao leaders, Sultan Kudarat. He kept, just like his father, Dato Boysan, ay nakipaglaban sa mga Kastila at nagdala ng kapayapaan sa halos lahat ng timog at gitnang Mindanao sa halos kalahating siglo sa pamamagitan ng isang kasunduang pangkapayapaan. He colonized out of his domain through military might, ranging from Davao Gulf to parts of Lanao and the Iligan Bay to the Zamboanga Peninsula and the islands of Basilan. This Maguindanao leader was known for his intelligence, tactfulness, and gallantry. In one point, in 1637, Governor General Sebastian Hurtado de Crucero launched an attack against on him. Kudarat was captured, but he escaped. Although he managed to escape death from his attackers, his wife was not as fortunate. It was believed that while holding her infant child, she threw herself over a cliff to avoid capture. He proved chivalrous when in 1639 he managed to ambush an attacking force, captured the Spanish Marines alive, treated their wounds, and then released them as sign of his goodwill, entering a peace treaty with us, the Spaniards. So, so he delivered a powerful speech to the Maranaos of Lake Lanao, recorded by Jesuit priestcoms, challenging them, "What have you done? Do you realize what subjection would reduce you to? A total slavery under the Spaniards. Turn your eyes to the subject nations and look at the misery to which such glorious nations to reduce to." Ang kanyang mga salita ay nagsilbing isang mabisang paalala na ang mga pangako ng Espanyol ay kadalasang nagpapadali sa panininlang na humahantong sa kontrol at pagkaalipin na humihigmok sa kanyang mga tao na labanan ng pagiging mga sakop na nagtrabaho sa ilalim ng awtoridad ng Espanyol.
I am Abigail Sinaba, and I am the last to discuss about the Spanish aggression. So let's proceed. What was the impact of the Spanish-Moro Wars on the Islamized and Christianized natives of the Philippine archipelago? So, overview. The Spanish-Moro Wars created long-lasting divisions between the Islamized Moros of the south and the Christianized natives. Under Spanish rule, these conflicts damages relationships, shape prejudices, and influence social dynamics for generations. So what was the impacts? First is mutual demonization. The wars led to widespread negative stereotypes on both sides. Christianized natives came to view the Moros as violent, brutal, and hostile, driven by repeated Moro raids. In turn, Moros saw Christianized natives as allies of the Spanish colonizer, who helped strip them of their independence. These stereotypes were rooted in war experiences rather than factual understanding of each other communities. Second, forced participation of Christianized natives. Many Christianized natives were subjected to military imprisonment by the Spaniards, forced to join military expeditions against the Moros regardless of their will. When sent into battle, the defending Moros fought back, resulting in casualties among these unwilling soldiers, turning them into unintended victims of the conflict. And third, cycle of revenge. The violence created a self-perpetuating cycle of revenge. Christianized natives who lost family members or saw loved ones once enslaved or injured, they often volunteered for Spanish expeditions, later to seek retribution. This transformed former victims into perpetrators, fueling more violence and deepening hostility between the two groups. Fourth, the Moro perspective. Moros conducted raids not out of pure brutality, but as a strategic defense. Their actions aimed to weaken communities that supplied the Spanish with manpower and to prevent further colonial attacks on their territories. This also harbored resentment towards Christianized natives for assisting the Spanish forces that threatened their independence. And fifth, long-term consequence. The war solidified ugly and negative views of each other among both groups. These divisions persisted long after the conflict ended, becoming lasting part of the social fabric of the Philippines. So in summary, the Spanish-Moro War significantly shaped intergroup relationships in the Philippines that created fear, hatred, stereotypes, and cycles of revenge between Islamized and Christianized communities, emerged from colonial manipulation, forced participation in war, and the geopolitical defense efforts of the Moros, leaving a legacy that continues to influence relations today. So let's proceed to lessons learned and peace message. The Spanish Moro Wars were defined by a destructive cycle. Violence only lead to more violence. And Spanish military force never earned real respect. Instead, it sparked defiance, vengeance, and hatred that hurt countless innocent people. Visayas natives were exploited to fight in Spanish expedition, and Christianized local were also pulled into the conflict too, all rooted partly in Spain's long history of resentment toward Muslim from 700 years of Moorish rule in southern Spain, and its core, this was a case of an external power where Spain manipulating local populations to fight each other. And that's what the fighting line captures. We're like chickens made to battle by master. And even after that master left, the fighting we were trained into is keep going.